Hi guys. Tonight we drift together into the dark belly of history, where creaking wooden planks and salt-sprayed sails carry you into the restless North Sea. The moon is veiled behind drifting clouds, and the wind lashes against your face with a sting sharp enough to wake even the heaviest dreamer. You crouch low on the deck of a longship, the world pitching beneath your bare feet, and you wonder for a fleeting second whether you'll even survive till dawn. After all, you probably won't survive this if you tried it yourself, without the calloused arms and iron stomach of a Viking. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And please, tell me your location and local time down in the comments. Now, dim the lights, and let's step into the spray. The ship moans like a living beast as its hull shudders against tall waves. You grip a slippery rope, and the fibers bite into your palm, wet and coarse. Salt water clings to your eyelashes, and you taste brine on your lips. It isn't a pleasant mouthful, it's raw, metallic, as though the ocean itself has claimed part of your tongue. You steady your knees, feeling the flecks of wood beneath your boots, every plank fastened by iron nails that ring faintly when struck by the sea. This vessel is no fragile craft. It's built for conquest and survival. Yet you sense its fragility when a towering wave smashes broadside, rattling teeth and sending buckets tumbling across the deck. A sailor beside you lets out a hoarse laugh, his voice rough from weeks of salty air. Better than land sickness, he jokes, though his knuckles are white on the oar handle. You can't help but smile, even as you stagger. Humor is the thin thread that keeps dread at bay. Historians tell us Viking longships were marvels of engineering. Narrow, flexible, fast. They could bend with the water instead of shattering against it. But historians still argue whether crews actually felt confident in storms, or whether they simply learned to hide their terror behind smirks and crude jokes. You suspect the latter, watching this man force his grin, while his eyes dart nervously toward the horizon. You notice the smell. Smoke from a tiny brazier tucked beneath a shield, mixing with tar, sweat, and the damp funk of unwashed wool. Your cloak, heavy with lanolin, is both shield and prison, sealing warmth but stinking faintly of sheep. When you pull it tighter, it scratches your neck. This, you realize, is the Viking perfume, a cocktail of grease, smoke, and sea. Quirky as it seems, some sagas even mention men rubbing fish oil into their hair, perhaps to repel lice, or maybe just because. Why not? The rain strikes harder now, needling through gaps in the sail. You duck, blinking against spray, and peer at the mast rising like a black tower against the storm. Ropes strain, taut as bowstrings. One wrong gust and the sail could tear, but crew move with a practiced rhythm, adjusting lines, their shouts half lost in the roar of wind. You think back to landfields, hearths, soft beds, and the contrast makes you shiver. Life at sea is nothing but movement. Constant rowing, constant watching, constant bracing for the next blow. Sleep will come later, if it comes at all. The longship rides another swell. You sway with it, heart hammering in your chest. It's terrifying, yes, but strangely exhilarating. Your senses sharpen the thunder's bass roll, the hiss of foam, the gritty taste of wind. You can see why young men flock to these voyages, why they abandoned farms for salt and steel. To conquer the sea is to conquer fear itself. Still, part of you wonders, was it bravery, or simply no better option? Historians still debate whether most Vikings left home willingly, seeking glory, or whether harsh Scandinavian winters forced desperate journeys across treacherous seas. Perhaps both truths live here on this deck, in the laughter of one man and the clenched jaw of another. You shift your gaze to the horizon, though the night hides it. Somewhere beyond lies England or Ireland or even the open Atlantic. The thought feels absurd, this fragile craft carrying you across entire worlds. Yet the keel hums with speed, slicing through dark water like a knife. The Vikings knew their ships were extensions of themselves, alive and capable. You steady your breath, feel the rhythm of the oars, and realize if the sea doesn't claim you tonight, perhaps you'll even grow to love this floating wooden dragon. A gull cries in the distance, oddly out of place in the storm. It circles once, a pale flicker against lightning, then vanishes. You take it as an omen, though you don't know whether for good or ill. Superstitions at sea are as endless as the waves. Some men touch amulets of Thor, others mutter charms against drowning. You, however, cling only to rope and breath, whispering nothing but silence. And so you endure, hour after hour, the storm's tantrum gradually dulling into rhythm, like a drumbeat that no longer frightens. Your eyes grow heavy, your limbs ache, but you remain awake, carried forward into the unknown night, the deck groaning, the sail flapping, the ocean's spray clinging to every fibre of your being. Tomorrow will bring its own trials, food, sleep, labour, but for now, you simply exist, a speck upon endless water. The storm quiets, leaving only a low rumble of swells against the hull, and at last the crew snatches the chance for rest. You tug your cloak tighter and search for a dry corner, though the very idea of dry feels like a cruel joke. The planks beneath you are slick, the seams between them still weeping brine. You lower yourself anyway, easing down on hard wood that yields nothing. No cushion, no softness, just the raw press of timber against bone. This is your bed now, a surface that rocks with every surge of the sea. A faint glow shivers on the deck, the last embers from a brazier huddled under a tarp. The smoke curls out in ribbons, biting your nose. It should feel comforting, but it doesn't. The smell mixes with mildew and the sour tang of wet wool. You shift onto your side, trying to fold your arm into a pillow, but the fabric clings cold against your cheek. Around you, men mutter in sleep, voices spilling into strange, half-formed words, dreams of land, of wives, of battles yet to come. You realize now how difficult real rest is here. Every creak of the hull sounds like warning. Every splash of spray pulls your eyes open. You can't stretch out fully. There's always someone's foot pressed near your shoulder, a knee nudging your ribs. Privacy doesn't exist on this ship. You are a body among bodies, a swarm of lungs breathing stale air under the stars. Some sagas mention that men would even sleep sitting upright, leaning against their shields. You wonder how they did it without sliding across the deck like loose cargo. Historians still argue whether hammocks were ever tried or whether Vikings never considered them at all. Either way, you don't see a hammock here, only tired men sprawled like discarded ropes. One sailor near your feet snores like a war horn. You envy his oblivion. Another scratches at his beard, muttering curses toward lice that never seem to die. Quirky as it sounds, some accounts suggest they carried tiny combs specifically to hunt the vermin. But at night, when the scratching becomes a chorus, you feel trapped in an orchestra of itches, squeaks, and rattling wood. No lullaby could cover that sound. The stars emerge, faint pinpricks above the black sky, and you find yourself staring upward despite the chill. The ship rocks gently now, more like a cradle than a coffin, and you almost convince yourself it could be soothing. The timbers creak in rhythm with your breath. The ocean licks the hull, a steady shh, like a mother hushing her child. Sleep might come, if you let it. But then a cold splash hits your face. You jerk awake, coughing, spitting seawater. A loose rope has slapped across the deck, spraying droplets. The sea will not let you forget where you are. You wipe your brow, shiver, and turn onto your back. Your cloak offers little comfort. Damp wool traps more cold than warmth now. You rub your hands together, blow into them, but the wind steals the heat instantly. You wonder how many nights like this a man could survive before breaking. Some whisper prayers before drifting off. A few murmur to Thor for safe passage, others to Frasier for mercy. You don't pray aloud, you only watch your breath plume pale against the night. Historians still debate how deeply religion guided everyday Viking habits, whether it was ritual constant or simply a comfort when fear gnawed too hard. Here, under this merciless sky, you sense belief is more necessity than choice. Time slips strangely at sea. Minutes feel like hours, hours like days. You blink, and suddenly gulls cry again, dawn light seeping grey along the horizon. You never truly slept. Not really. You simply hovered between waking and drifting, rocked by wood and water. Your body aches, stiff and cold. When you try to rise, your knees groan like old hinges. You are young, yet you feel centuries older. One man claps your shoulder, grinning through cracked lips. "Good night?" he teases. You give a weary laugh, because that's all there is to do. The night has passed, and you survived, if surviving means simply not falling overboard. This was no bed of feathers, no cozy hearthside mattress. This was endurance, the art of lying awake and calling it sleep. And so it will be again, for as long as the voyage lasts. The horizon lightens into a dull silver, and with it comes the promise of food. Your stomach growls like an impatient hound, reminding you that the night's tossing gave little comfort and even less strength. A wooden chest creaks open, and out come the stores: dried fish, strips of salted meat, and a slab of butter wrapped in cloth that already smells a little too alive. This is breakfast on the open sea, and you accept it without complaint because there is no alternative. You pinch the fish between your fingers, its flesh leathery and stiff. When you bite down, the salt nearly burns your tongue, yet the richness that follows keeps you chewing. It isn't fresh, not even close, but it does the job. Surviving on voyages meant relying heavily on dried cod, herring, or even fermented shark back home in Iceland. Contemporary evidence suggests that the Vikings perfected these preservation methods to endure long weeks where hunting or gathering would be impossible. The flavors are harsh, but the nutrition is certain. Beside you, a shipmate slathers butter across his fish like it were bread. You can't help but chuckle. An odd little note is that dairy was often eaten this way, thick and raw, even in the middle of a storm. Butter, curds, and even soured milk travelled with them, carried in barrels that rolled with the ship's sway. It seems eccentric, but fat was precious fuel for muscle, and these men valued strength more than delicacy. Overhead, gulls screech and wheel in the early light, lured by the scent. Their cries are shrill, unnerving, but you welcome them anyway, they mean. Land is not impossibly far. Some sailors even toss scraps skyward, half to test the birds' hunger, half to bribe fate for calmer waters. Whether superstition or play, you can't quite tell. You chew slowly, rocking with the deck. The briny air carries the scent of fish back at you, mingling with tar and sweat until the whole ship feels like a giant pantry. Oddly enough, it sharpens your appetite rather than dulling it. Hunger makes simple food taste like feast. Still, you wonder about balance. Where is the bread? Where are the greens? Modern researchers remain divided on how often Vikings carried grains or vegetables to sea. Some argue barley and flatbread were staples, baked in advance and stored. Others claim such items spoiled too quickly, making dried fish the truest constant. Whatever the truth, you can only taste salt, salt, and more salt this morning. One sailor offers you a piece of hard cheese, yellow and crumbly, tucked in a pouch of hide. You nibble it, surprised at the sharpness. Cheese survives the sea surprisingly well, and there's comfort in the familiarity. You close your eyes, pretending for a moment that you are home, sitting by a fire with a wooden bowl on your lap, not perched on a rocking plank with gulls screaming above. Yet there is camaraderie here too. Food is shared, not hoarded. A man breaks his fish in half to give a younger boy, another passes the butter around without stinginess. Perhaps hunger draws men together more than wealth ever could. You wipe your fingers on your cloak, greasy now with the evidence of breakfast, and take a deep breath of the morning. The sea is calmer today. The sky is still iron grey, but the rain has eased, and you can feel warmth in the air. Eating together steadies you, roots you in a rhythm beyond fear. Your belly is not full, but it is content enough. And so the day begins, with salted fish between your teeth, gull cries overhead, and the endless sea rolling beneath. Tomorrow it will taste the same, and the day after. Yet somehow, that repetition is its own strange comfort. The sun edges higher, faint and pale through low clouds, and already the call goes up. Row. The word echoes down the deck like a drumbeat, sharp and merciless. You shuffle to your oar, shoulders sore from yesterday, knees stiff from the night's failed sleep. But there is no pause at sea, no indulgence in weakness. You grasp the heavy shaft, its wood worn smooth by countless hands, and slide it into the churning water. The moment you lean back, the ache begins. Your palms sting where blisters bloom, and you feel them tear open with each pull. The salt water doesn't forgive. It bites into wounds, keeping them raw. The rhythm must be steady, the motion exact, because if one man falters, the entire line of oars stumbles. You hear the overseer bark a voice like gravel dragged across iron commanding the beat. The ship responds, not like a collection of men, but like a single creature, muscles straining in unison. It is well documented that Viking longships could cover astonishing distances by oar alone, sometimes upwards of 100 miles in a day when winds failed them. The design, sleek and shallow, allowed these vessels to skim across the surface, powered by sheer human endurance. As you pull, you realize how much that endurance costs. Each stroke feels like a small death, and yet there is no choice but to continue. Beside you, a man begins to chant, not words you understand at first, but sounds, guttural and rhythmic. The chant grows, others join, until the rowing itself becomes a song. It's not beautiful, it's raw, rough, but it keeps the arms moving. Curiously enough, some sagas describe these sea songs as part prayer, part tool designed to pace the muscles, to drown out the screams of tendons tearing. You join in, your voice a cracked whisper, and the work feels lighter for a moment. The smell of sweat rises quickly. Wool cloaks dampen with exertion, hair mats against brows, and the air tastes of iron and salt. The ship moves faster, slicing through swells, spray hitting your cheeks, cooling the fire in your veins. Your ears ring with the splash of dozens of oars hitting the sea in harmony, shh, 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 like the breath of some giant beast. Still, exhaustion gnaws. Your vision blurs as your arms tremble, and you wonder how long men can keep this rhythm. Modern scholars offer conflicting views. Some claim shifts rotated frequently, with half the crew resting while the others rowed. Others argue that in dire stretches, all hands labored together, hour after punishing hour. Whatever the truth, your body feels trapped in the harsher version, your muscles burning without respite. A sudden laugh breaks through the grunt of labor. The man in front of you, broad, bearded, teeth yellow as old parchment, makes a face, sticking out his tongue as if mocking death itself. You laugh despite yourself, the absurdity offering a moment's relief. It is in these tiny gestures that morale survives. Without them, you suspect madness would creep in fast, carried on every wave. Your hands slip, and the oar nearly smacks your ribs. You catch it, heart racing, but the overseer's glare falls on you like a blade. No words, just eyes, cold and sharp. You row harder, shame fueling your arms. Discipline is absolute here. Most chronicles agree that rules aboard were strict. Negligence could bring harsh punishment, even lashings. A longship was no place for the lazy or careless. Every stroke mattered, every breath fed the collective. And so you push on. The chant grows louder, sweat pours, and time blurs into muscle memory. Your arms no longer feel like yours, they are ropes, pulled by some invisible force. The sea is your master, the oar your leash, and you obey because disobedience would mean ruin for all. Finally, the command comes. Rest. The oars lift, dripping arcs of silver into the air, and you slump forward, chest heaving. Your hands throb, fingers locked around the shaft as if refusing to let go. When you pry them open, the skin is raw, streaked red. You dip your palms into the sea, hissing at the sting, then wipe them on your cloak. The salt will keep infection at bay, you tell yourself, though you're not sure you believe it. The ship glides now, carried by wind and current. The silence after rowing is strange, almost unsettling. You hear only the creak of timbers, the distant call of seabirds, the soft hiss of waves against the hull. For a moment the world feels still, and you can almost pretend you're at peace. Yet peace at sea is always fragile. You know another call to row will come soon, perhaps in minutes, perhaps in hours. Until then, you savor this fleeting pause, stretching your aching arms, rolling your shoulders. You glance at your fellow rowers, faces gaunt, beards matted, eyes glazed with fatigue. And yet, there's pride too. They row because they must, because this is what survival demands. You breathe deep, filling your lungs with sharp, salty air. The sea stretches infinite around you, horizon blurred where water meets sky. Somewhere far off, unseen shores wait. But for now, your world is this oar, this deck, this sweat. You close your eyes, letting the lull of the waves seep into your bones, even as your muscles still twitch with remembered strain. The respite won't last. You know it. Yet here, in this fragile calm, you feel a strange kinship with the ship itself, both of you battered, creaking, but still moving forward. That, you realize, is the essence of life at sea. Endure, pull, rest, repeat. Always forward, never backward, until land rises from the horizon like a promise. The break in rowing doesn't last long. Soon another order cracks across the deck, not for oars but for food to be prepared. Men shuffle toward the center, where an iron pot has been lashed to a crossbeam, swaying slightly with the rhythm of the sea. You wander closer, drawn by the promise of warmth. The smell rises faintly, smoked meat and herbs, though dulled by the salt wind until it becomes more memory than reality. The cook, if you could call him that, squats beside the pot. His hair is matted, his cloak greasy, but his hands move with practiced certainty. He tosses dried strips of meat into the bubbling water, followed by barley grains, a handful of wild onions saved from shore, and whatever else he can scrounge. It is a thin stew, more water than substance, but after hours of rowing your mouth waters anyway. Archaeological findings confirm that Vikings carried simple iron cauldrons on voyages, suspended so they wouldn't tip in the ship's rocking. The meals were never lavish, thick porridge, broth, or fish stews were staples. No feasts here, only practicality. Still, the scent of something hot is enough to draw every eye, every empty belly. A man near you chuckles, pointing to a pouch hung carefully away from the heat. Don't touch the dried horse meat, he warns, unless you fancy chewing leather. Oddly enough, horse flesh was sometimes eaten when supplies ran low, despite taboos in certain regions. Some men swore it carried the favor of the gods, others spat at the idea. You aren't sure which side of that superstition you fall on, but you can imagine the desperation it would take to bite into it. The pot hisses as more ingredients are added. Someone sprinkles in herbs, dried nettles perhaps, their scent sharp and grassy. You lean over, inhaling the steam, and for a moment it feels like standing beside a hearth at home. That illusion breaks when a wave crashes over the gunwale, sending spray across the fire. The flames sputter, the cook curses, but the pot holds. There is ongoing debate about how often Vikings actually cooked while at sea. Some historians believe fires were rare, too dangerous on wooden decks, and that cold meals were the norm. Others argue that with careful management, cooking was essential for morale. Watching this pot sway and spit, you sense the truth may lie somewhere between. Risky, yes, but without it, weeks of cold fish would break the spirit faster than hunger. You cup a wooden bowl offered by calloused hands, its rim chipped, the surface stained from years of use. The stew sloshes inside, thin and murky, but its heat seeps into your fingers. You sip, nearly burning your tongue, and swallow greedily. The flavor is simple: salty broth, chewy meat, the faint bite of onion, yet it feels like ambrosia after the night's ordeal. You close your eyes, letting warmth spread through your chest, easing knots of fatigue. Around you, men eat noisily, slurping and gulping. Some joke about the stew's strength. Tastes like boiled boots. One laughs, and the others roar. Humor hides the reality. The food is barely enough. Still, these moments bind the crew. Eating together is as much ritual as sustenance. The clatter of bowls, the shared laughter, the steam rising in cold air, all of it forms a fragile sense of home, even here in the middle of endless water. Your spoon strikes something unexpected, a nut, hard and sweet. You glance at the cook, who winks. Exotic goods sometimes found their way into sea rations: hazelnuts, dried fruit, even honey if luck held. You roll the nut on your tongue, savoring its rare sweetness, imagining the forests of distant lands. Such small surprises could lift morale more than gold. As the pot empties, bowls are licked clean, spoons scraped dry. The cook ladles out the last drops, and then the brazier is banked, fire covered with ash. The smell lingers, smoke mingling with sea air, a reminder that survival depends not just on strength, but also on these fleeting comforts. When the meal is done, the men sprawl back to their tasks. Some scrub bowls in seawater, others coil ropes or patch sails. You lean against the mast, belly no longer gnawing with hunger, eyelids heavy. The ship creaks, gulls cry, and for a brief stretch of time the sea feels less cruel. But the reprieve is fragile. Another storm could scatter fire and pot alike, leaving only cold rations once more. You realize how much these men gamble with every spark they strike aboard this wooden vessel. Fire is both friend and enemy, warmth and potential destruction. You close your eyes, listening to the quiet lapping of waves, and wonder if tonight will bring another hot meal or only salted fish and silence. The deck bustles again, though no one seems to be working very hard. After the meager meal, men loosen their shoulders and drift into chatter. You catch fragments of conversation, half-laughed, boasts about raids, whispered worries about storms, and tales so outrageous you know they must be inventions. A bearded sailor nearby leans in, voice lowered, telling of a sea serpent that rose taller than the mast and swallowed a sheep whole. His audience gasps, then bursts into laughter. It is well attested in the sagas that Viking crews kept their spirits alive with storytelling. These weren't just diversions, they were training in memory, entertainment, and even education. Through tales of gods and heroes, younger sailors learned values of bravery and cunning. Through tall tales, men found release from fear. You can't help but smile at one quirky detail. Some accounts mention men balancing on the gunwales to act out scenes, risking a plunge into the waves just to sell the drama. You imagine one of them pretending to be Thor swinging his hammer, slipping then flailing into the sea, humorous in story, terrifying in reality. Perhaps that's why laughter comes so quickly now. It pushes back against the ever-present shadow of danger. A man beside you nudges your elbow, asking if you've heard the tale of Ragnar and the serpent pit. You shake your head, and he dives in, painting the scene with vivid words, his hands carving arcs through the air. The crew leans closer, drawn to his rhythm. Even the gulls overhead seem to fall quiet for a moment, as if listening. Of course, researchers remain uncertain how accurate these oral tales were. Did sailors truly pass the time by repeating grand sagas word for word? Or did they spin smaller, rougher stories, improvised in the moment? The truth may lie somewhere between. What you hear tonight feels raw, unpolished, but still powerful, more like gossip than scripture, more like a joke shared among weary comrades than a holy recital. The voices rise and fall like the waves themselves. Laughter erupts, then dies down, replaced by murmured confidences. One man speaks of a woman left behind, her hair bright as flax. Another curses his neighbor back home, promising revenge once he returns. Their words weave a net, holding the crew together. Each tale becomes a plank in the fragile raft of morale. And yet, beneath the laughter, you sense unease. A few men grow quiet, eyes on the horizon. One fiddles with a wooden amulet carved in the shape of a hammer. Another spits over the side, muttering words you don't catch. Even in the safety of stories, superstition lingers like a shadow. You lean back, watching the clouds drift, and the voices become softer, more like a lull. The sea stretches endless, the ship creaks in rhythm, and the chatter settles into background hum. You realize that in these small tales, half gossip, half saga, the Vikings fought not just boredom, but fear itself. For if they let silence rule, dread might creep in with it. Your eyelids grow heavy, lulled by the cadence of voices, until a sudden roar of laughter jolts you awake. Someone has just finished a bawdy joke, too crude for you to repeat. Crew howls, slapping their thighs, stamping their feet. The ship shakes with mirth, and for a moment it feels almost like a feast hall on land, though the benches are wet planks, the ale is stale water, and the hearth is nothing more than memory. You smile to yourself, warmed not by fire, but by the resilience of men who find joy even here. Perhaps that, more than any weapon or sail, was the true strength of these voyages, the ability to laugh into the void, to fill the endless silence of the sea with voices, however cracked or absurd. The laughter fades, replaced by the sharp bite of wind. You tug your cloak tighter, the wool stiff with salt, and huddle against the side of the ship. The air is colder now, the kind that cuts through cloth and sinks into bone. You shift your weight, trying to fold your knees closer to your chest, but there is no true comfort here. The sea makes sure of that. It is well known from preserved textiles that Viking cloaks were woven thick with wool, heavy enough to shed rain and trap body heat. Archaeological finds even show traces of lanolin natural oils that gave the cloth its water-resistant sheen. You press your cloak closer, grateful for that faint greasy smell, even if it makes you wrinkle your nose. Warmth means survival, and you are in no position to complain about scent. Curiously enough, some crews carried sheepskins or furs as extra layers, tossing them over shoulders or wrapping them around their feet. One man beside you wears a hooded cloak so patched it looks like a quilt of every animal in Norway. You can't decide if it's ridiculous or brilliant. Either way, he looks warmer than you. The cold brings out strange behavior among the crew. A few stamp their feet to chase circulation. Others huddle in pairs, backs pressed together, sharing heat without shame. You notice one man place a small stone under his cloak, freshly warmed near the brazier earlier, now radiating a tiny island of comfort. Clever, you think? Improvised solutions bloom when frost bites. There is, however, disagreement among scholars about just how effective these wool garments were. Some argue that cloaks alone could not protect against nights of freezing spray, that sailors must have layered endlessly, or even relied on animal hides. Others claim that Norse wool was so densely woven it rivaled modern waterproofing. As you sit here shivering, teeth on edge, you lean toward the harsher view. Cloaks are shields, yes, but imperfect ones. The wind whistles through the rigging, high and lonely. You bury your chin deeper, your breath fogging before your lips. The taste of salt never leaves your mouth. A sailor sneezes violently nearby, then mutters a curse, rubbing his nose with the back of his hand. The sound makes you wonder how many colds, how many fevers spread across crews like wildfire in this damp world. Still, you adapt. Your body learns to curve against the wind, to shield vulnerable skin. Your fingers stiffen, but you flex them against the cloak's fold, willing blood to keep flowing. The night may bring more biting chill, but for now the day crawls forward, each hour another test of endurance. You think of home again, of hearth fires and thick beds stuffed with straw, of warm stew ladled into wooden bowls. That memory burns brighter than any brazier here. Maybe that's the secret: carry the warmth inside you, even when the sea refuses to share its own. The ship creaks, gulls wheel above, and you sink deeper into the scratchy embrace of wool. You are not comfortable, not truly warm, but you are alive. And in the middle of the ocean, perhaps that is enough. The grey of the day lifts into something sharper. The clouds thin, and shafts of sunlight streak across the rolling sea like molten gold. You squint against the glare, your eyes roar from spray and lack of sleep. The helmsman calls out, and men stir to their feet, gathering around a figure holding something strange, a chunk of crystal, pale and glinting in the sunday. It is widely accepted that Viking sailors crossed immense distances without compasses. Instead, they relied on the sun, the stars, and their uncanny reading of waves and birds. Yet you now see another tool in action, the legendary sunstone. The man tilts the crystal in his hand, watching as light scatters into faint beams. He narrows his eyes, then points toward the horizon. A murmur rises. The course is confirmed. The air smells of salt and tar as you lean closer, curious. The crystal glimmers, catching fire in its heart, even though clouds drift across the sky. You might be surprised to know that certain minerals, like Iceland's spar, split light into twin rays, allowing sailors to find the sun's hidden position. Whether myth or science, the trick seems real enough here. The helmsman nods, his grip steady on the tiller, adjusting the ship's nose toward that invisible guide. You feel the shift in the deck beneath your feet as the longship responds. The sails strain, the oars bite, and the vessel hums with purpose. You breathe in the moment, realizing how delicate the balance is. Wood, wind, and now a crystal that decides the fate of dozens of lives. Of course, there is continuing debate in the academic world about whether sunstones were truly used in Viking times or if the sagas exaggerated their presence. Some argue the idea is poetic invention. Others cite shards of crystal found in shipwrecks as tantalizing proof. Watching the crew's reverence for this sliver of stone, you suspect truth may live somewhere between. Even if not universal, perhaps some captains trusted these glimmers of magic to steady their course. The sea itself seems to respect the ritual. Waves roll in long, gentle swells, and the ship glides more smoothly now. The men, buoyed by the sense of direction, relax slightly. A few hum soft tunes under their breath. The fear of drifting aimlessly has eased. Purpose, however fragile, restores courage. You taste the salt on your lips again, thicker now as spray leaps over the gunwale. The sunstone disappears back into its pouch, but its effect lingers. You imagine the crystal glowing like a secret heart within the ship, a reminder that knowledge, however odd or uncertain, can be as vital as muscle. One sailor grins at you, tapping the side of his nose. "Stone nose," he mutters, as if confiding in a friend. You smile back, though a chill runs down your spine. Belief can be as powerful as truth, and perhaps, out here in the endless blue, the difference doesn't matter at all. The day lengthens. The ship cuts forward, its dragon prow breaking spray into glitter. The wind fills the sail, ropes creak, and the horizon holds steady where the helmsman points. You stand taller now, cloak whipping at your ankles, and for the first time in days, you feel not lost but guided. Somewhere beyond lies land, though unseen. Somewhere beyond lies destiny, shaped by the courage of men and the shimmer of a crystal. And as you breathe deeply of the sea air, you realize, in this world of shifting waves and uncertain skies, even the smallest shard of light can mean the difference between despair and hope. The calm does not last. The wind stiffens, the sail thrashes like a beast straining at its leash, and dark waves mount higher against the hull. Shouts ripple along the deck, commands, curses, prayers all blending into one frantic chorus. You glance up at the square sail, its seams quivering, its fabric snapping so violently you fear it will tear free. Archaeological remains and ship reconstructions confirm that Viking sails were made of heavy wool, woven tight, and smeared with animal fat or resin to resist water. Still, Even the strongest cloth weakens in storm winds. You watch as men scramble to reinforce ropes, the mast creaking like an old tree ready to split. One curious note surfaces. Sagas tell of warriors stitching patches directly into sails while storms raged, balancing on slick beams, needles in their teeth. You see it happening now. Two sailors climbing up with strips of fabric, their bodies swaying with the mast as they lash patches over straining seams. Their hands move fast, more sewing than mending, as if the entire voyage depends on this thread alone. Perhaps it does. You taste rain before it falls, metallic on your lips. Then the sky opens, cold sheets pouring over you, blinding, drenching. The deck becomes a river, water streaming between planks, swirling around ankles. You cling to a rope, heart pounding, trying to steady yourself as the ship tilts dangerously to one side. Among scholars, there is disagreement over how much sail the Vikings dared to keep raised during storms. Some argue they often dropped them entirely, relying on oars to steady the ship. Others claim seasoned crews trimmed but never abandoned their sails, trusting their skill to guide them through. Watching the frantic hands above, you sense this captain belongs to the latter school, bold or reckless. You cannot yet tell. The sound is overwhelming. The roar of the wind, the snap of canvas, the groan of wood, and beneath it all the deep thunder of waves pounding the hull. Your ears ring as if inside a forge. Every sense screams that the sea is stronger, that you are nothing more than driftwood waiting to be swallowed. A man slips on the soaked deck, his leg twisting beneath him. He howls, but another sailor grabs his arm, dragging him upright, shoving him back toward the benches. No sympathy, only survival. The storm leaves no space for pity. You glance upward again. The patches hold for now. Threads bite into wet wool, strips flutter but stay. The men climb down, soaked and shaking, their faces pale with exhaustion. One spits seawater, another crosses himself quickly before shoving the gesture away. Ashamed. Belief flickers and falters under pressure, but habit is hard to erase. Your own cloak is plastered to your skin, heavy as stone. You shiver violently, teeth clattering, but you keep your grip on the rope. The rain lashes your face until you cannot tell what is seawater and what is sky. You blink against it, vision blurred, and pray not aloud, not to Odin, not to Christ, not to anyone in particular. You simply will the ship to hold. Then, slowly, it does. The mast bends but does not break. The sail strains but does not rip. The storm, like some cruel giant, roars its fury and then slackens. The waves still heave, but less violently. The rain thins into drizzle. The men sag where they stand, heads bowed, chests heaving. You exhale for what feels like the first time in hours. The patch sail droops, ugly with scars, but it remains, and that is enough. You realize that survival often looks less like victory and more like a scrap of cloth holding together with spit and faith. You wipe your face, push wet hair from your brow, and allow yourself a bitter smile. The storm has passed, though the memory will cling as tightly as the damp wool on your shoulders. The storm leaves behind a ship soaked to its bones and a crew weary to the marrow. Men slump on benches, chests heaving, eyes hollow. The sail hangs patched and dripping, the ropes slack like exhausted arms. You draw a breath of air heavy with wet wool, tar, and smoke, and realize something more mundane now demands attention: nature's call. It is widely understood that life at sea offered no privacy. On land, a man could slip behind a tree or squat in the field. Here, on a wooden deck cramped with bodies, there are only two choices: lean over the side or use a bucket. You watch as a sailor lugs one such vessel from beneath a bench, its wood darkened from years of unpleasant duty. He places it near the stern, out of the way of ropes and feet, and without ceremony, takes his turn. You avert your eyes, though the sound is impossible to ignore. The crew, seasoned in discomfort, barely notice. They keep working at ropes, chewing on strips of dried fish, or scratching at their beards. One odd little detail comes to mind. Some sagas hint that buckets were not only used but occasionally emptied mid-journey onto unlucky foes if ships drew close in combat. Crude, yes, but effective. You grimace, half amused, half horrified at the thought. The wind shifts, carrying an odor sharp enough to curl your stomach. A boy, younger than most, wriggles uncomfortably, waiting his turn, clearly embarrassed. An older sailor claps his shoulder with a laugh, muttering something about no modesty at sea. Laughter ripples, easing the boy's shame, but you feel the sting of it anyway. Privacy is a forgotten luxury here. Researchers remain divided over how crews handled sanitation for weeks on the water. Some argue that buckets were the norm, emptied directly overboard, while others suggest men more often relieved themselves at the side, clinging to ropes. Either way, both methods carried risk. A slip meant the sea could claim you faster than any sword. You imagine icy water closing over your head and tighten your grip on the railing instinctively. Your cloak flaps against your legs as you edge toward the bow, seeking cleaner air. The gulls overhead swoop and shriek, circling in hope of scraps, oblivious to human indignities below. You wonder how men endured this part of the voyage without succumbing to sickness. In truth, many didn't. Accounts tell of stomach fevers and parasites spreading easily in close quarters. You glance at the bucket again, at hands rough with sores, and shiver with a dread deeper than storm waves. Disease, invisible and relentless, may be the greater killer at sea. A sailor tips the bucket, contents splashing into the ocean. The current swallows it instantly, washing the deck with brine. He sets it down again, ready for the next round, and life continues as though nothing unusual occurred. You shake your head in disbelief. What once felt shocking now becomes part of the rhythm. Hunger, rowing, sleeping, mending, and yes, even this. Survival strips away pretenses until only necessity remains. You sit back on the damp planks, drawing your knees up, resting your chin. The smell lingers faintly, but the wind carries most of it away. Around you, the men resume chatter, stories and boasts rising once more. You realize that humor must have been the shield here too, laughter covering embarrassment. To live pressed so close together, a crew had to learn to endure not just storms and hunger, but each other's bodies in all their unpleasant reality. And perhaps that is the truest lesson of this moment. Dignity bends easily when weighed against survival. You close your eyes, letting the ship rock you like a reluctant cradle, and accept that the sea demands more than muscle or courage. It demands surrender to the humbling truth of being human, even in the shadow of a dragon-headed prow. The storm has passed, the bucket is stowed, and the sea stretches calm again, black glass flecked with white. Darkness settles in, thick as ink, pierced only by faint starlight. You tilt your head back and stare upward. The night sky blooms with constellations, each pinprick shimmering with quiet certainty. For the first time in days, you feel a hush, a reprieve from shouting and pounding waves. It is well established that Norse sailors navigated at night by the stars. They recognized patterns the way you might recognize faces, in a crowd familiar, dependable, each one holding a direction. The North Star, steady and unblinking, becomes your anchor in the heavens. Your gaze lingers on it, feeling steadied yourself. The helmsman follows it like scripture, his hand steady on the tiller, as though the star whispers instructions no storm can erase. But curiously enough, not every star had a role. Some seafarers believed certain constellations brought luck, while others spelled doom. You overhear an older man mutter about a wolf star rising low on the horizon, a sign he insists foretells quarrels aboard. A young sailor scoffs, spitting over the side. Yet the older one keeps glancing back, lips tight, as though daring the night to prove him wrong. Superstition floats here as easily as the ship itself. Your eyes trace shapes. A hunter with bow drawn, a great bear circling overhead. The stars glimmer cold and ancient, older than any tale whispered on this deck. You feel small beneath them, smaller even than the ship rocking under your feet. The smell of tar and damp wool fades for a moment, replaced by the crisp chill of night air. sharp in your lungs. You exhale, watching your breath vanish into the vast sky. There is an unresolved debate among historians. Did Vikings truly memorize detailed star maps? Or did they rely more on instinct patterns of waves, the flight of seabirds, the color of water? Perhaps both. As you sit here staring upward, you sense instinct would not be enough. The sea is too vast, too cruel, to trust only guesswork. Yet memory too must falter, for clouds can erase the heavens in moments. You wonder if this tension between knowledge and chance was the true art of navigation. The night grows colder. You draw your cloak closer, wool scratchy on your neck. Around you, sailors shift and murmur. Some drift toward sleep, slumped against benches, faces pale in starlight. Others remain awake, whispering quietly, voices carrying over the still water. One man hums a tune low in his throat, almost a lullaby. The sound soothes, mingling with the creak of timbers. Your own thoughts wander. The stars seem eternal, yet how many men before you have stared at them with the same hope? Farmers, shepherds, wanderers, each finding meaning in the scatter of light. And here, on a fragile wooden dragon crossing the dark sea, those lights decide life or death. You close your eyes for a moment, imagining each star as a torch held by ancestors, guiding the ship across the abyss. A gust of wind rattles the sail, snapping you back. The helmsman adjusts, eyes fixed skyward, lips moving silently as he names constellations. His voice is low, reverent, as if calling old friends. You lean on the rail, watching water shimmer with faint starlight, and feel yourself sway with the rhythm. The sea sighs, the sky glitters, and for a fleeting heartbeat, you are no longer afraid. Time stretches strangely at night. Minutes fold into hours. Hours dissolve into a blur. You fight drowsiness, but the stars hold you, steady and watchful. They whisper of direction, of destiny, of home somewhere beyond the endless dark. When at last your eyes grow heavy, you let them close, trusting that the same stars will keep watch while you drift into uneasy rest. When dawn returns, grey and cold, you wake to the scrape of wood and the sound of sloshing liquid. Men are gathering near the center of the deck, where barrels squat like fat sentries bound with iron hoops. One lid creaks open, and the smell that escapes is not entirely fresh, something between stale bread and sour apples. You realize it is time for water, though calling it fresh would be generous. Archaeological evidence and written records confirm that Vikings carried water in wooden casks, sometimes lined with pitch or tar to keep the liquid from seeping away. But water left in a barrel for weeks in shifting temperatures quickly turned foul. To combat this, sailors often mixed it with ale, a weak brew that kept safer in storage. You dip a ladle into the cloudy liquid and sip. It tastes of wood, faintly bitter, but it slides down your throat without complaint. Hydration matters more than taste. A fellow sailor beside you grins, his beard dripping as he gulps deeply. "Better than the sea," he says, then wipes his mouth with the back of his hand. You nod. It's true the ocean offers nothing but death in its brine. You might be surprised to learn that mead and ale weren't luxuries aboard but necessities. Even a weak brew carried less risk of disease than stagnant water. Some accounts suggest crews rationed their ale carefully, each man allowed a set portion daily. Others hint at moments when the drink flowed too freely, loosening tongues, sparking quarrels. Watching the barrel today, you believe both. Men drink quickly, greedily, as though fearing the ration might vanish before their turn. There remains disagreement among researchers about how much alcohol was truly consumed at sea. Some argue that watered-down ale was constant, replacing plain water almost entirely. Others claim it was reserved for shorter voyages, while longer expeditions depended more on water barrels. As you watch men tip ladles to their lips, smacking with satisfaction, you suspect the truth is simpler. Whatever lasted longest without poisoning them, they drank. The barrel empties faster than you expect. Another is rolled forward, its surface scarred by years of journeys. The thud of wood against deck echoes like a heartbeat. When the lid is pried off, a faint hiss escapes, the sour tang even stronger. You wrinkle your nose, but men line up eagerly. Desperation dulls disgust. The youngest sailor sips, then coughs violently, sputtering. The others laugh, thumping his back, teasing him for weakness. He wipes his mouth, cheeks burning, but drinks again anyway. Thirst is crueler than taste. You take your second sip more slowly, letting it settle. The liquid clings oddly on your tongue, but it eases the dryness in your throat, loosening the tight knot that had been forming in your chest. The gulls wheel overhead, shrieking. One swoops low, landing on a barrel lid, pecking curiously. A sailor swats at it, but the bird dodges and scolds loudly, as if mocking the entire crew. You chuckle despite yourself. In this footing world, even gulls seem like company. When the drinking ends, the lids are sealed again, barrels pushed back into place. The men return to tasks, coiling ropes, checking seams, sharpening blades. But the air feels different now, slightly lighter. Even foul water can restore spirits, reminding you all that survival is still possible. You lick your lips, the aftertaste bitter, and sit against the mast. The memory of clear springs at home rises sharp and cruel in your mind, water running cold over stones, sweet and pure. You swallow hard, forcing it away. Here, on this ship, you drink what you must, not what you desire. That is the law of the sea. And so you rest, belly heavy with cloudy liquid, listening to the creak of timbers, the slap of waves, the muttered jokes of men who know too well the difference between luxury and necessity. The barrels are sealed once more, and now the ship settles into its rhythm of work and waiting. You soon learn that life aboard follows a simple rule. Not everyone rows, not everyone rests. Shifts keep the vessel alive. You feel the tap on your shoulder. It is your turn to step back, to let another man grip the oar while you retreat to the benches. It is well documented through sagas and shipboard accounts that Viking crews divided their time into watches. Half the men pulled the oars or tended the sail while the others slept, ate, or performed repairs. This rotation gave the longship its endurance, allowing it to move day and night, hour after hour, across seas that would otherwise swallow it whole. You lower yourself onto the planks, shoulders still twitching from remembered effort, and close your eyes, grateful for the pause. Yet even during rest, the sea gives no true peace. The deck rocks under you, and every creak of timber sounds like warning. Still, exhaustion presses heavier than fear. You curl against a coil of rope, letting its roughness dig into your ribs. It is not comfort, but it is enough. One curious custom you notice. Some men tuck their cloaks over their heads entirely, shutting out light and noise. Others stretch on their backs, mouths open, snoring without shame. A few slump upright, arms folded, sleeping as though carved from wood. You marvel at their ability to drift into slumber in such a place. Perhaps habit teaches the body to surrender where the mind resists. Meanwhile, those on duty chant at their oars, the sound carrying across the deck in steady rhythm. It is a lullaby of sorts, harsh and rough, but consistent. You find yourself half dreaming, half awake, carried by the pulse of voices and the slap of oars. There is still debate among scholars about how strict these shifts truly were. Some argue that discipline aboard was as rigid as any army, with timed rotations and harsh punishments for slackers. Others believe it was looser, shaped by necessity, men working until they dropped, then replaced by whoever still had strength. As you watch weary sailors trade places without protest, you suspect the truth lies in the middle, a rhythm born less from rule and more from survival. Your mind drifts. You dream of fields of barley swaying in the wind, of soft earth beneath your feet, of birdsong. Then a shout snaps you awake. A sailor has slipped, his oar striking the water wrong. sending spray across the deck. The overseer growls, voice sharp, but the rhythm resumes quickly. Mistakes are not tolerated long here. You rub your face, dragging salt from your beard, and sit upright. Your rest has passed quicker than expected. Already the tap comes again, your turn. You drag yourself back to the oar, muscles heavy but willing. The shift demands it. You slide into place, grasp the handle, and lean into the rhythm once more. And so the cycle continues. Row, rest, row, rest. Each man becomes a cog in the living machine of the ship. The hours blur, stitched together by the pulse of oars, the groan of wood, the sigh of wind. You realize now that time at sea is not measured in days or nights, but in turns your time at the oar, your time off, repeating until land finally breaks the horizon. You bite down on the thought, steadying yourself. The ocean cares nothing for your fatigue. The longship moves only when its crew submits to the rhythm, and so you do. You bow to it, muscles burning, hands raw, mind half asleep, body half alive. Survival is no longer an act of heroism, but of repetition. Always forward, never stopping, until land answers the call. The pattern of shifts grinds on until the hours blur together, and soon you notice something unexpected growing in the spaces between. Friendship. It is not born from luxury or shared pleasures, but from necessity, men depending on each other to survive, and finding kinship in the process. Most surviving chronicles agree that Viking crews forged bonds as strong as kinship, even if they were strangers when they set sail. A man who shares his fish with you, or steadies your oar when you falter, becomes closer than a cousin back on land. You feel this truth when a burly rower presses half a chunk of cheese into your hand without a word. His face is unreadable, but his gesture lingers like warmth against the cold air. Sometimes camaraderie shows itself through jokes. One curious habit emerges. Sailors create nicknames for each other, often mocking and affectionate in equal measure. The tall, lanky youth becomes Stork, while a bald man is dubbed Egghead. You chuckle when someone calls you Sleepy Eyes, though you wonder how quickly that name will cling. Laughter rolls across the deck, stronger than any storm. Of course, scholars remain uncertain about how harmonious these crews truly were. Some argue that bonds were fragile, strained by hunger, cold, and danger. Others believe the brotherhood of the sea was sacred, an unbreakable trust. Watching men tease, share, and even sing together, you sense both are true. Tempers flare, but laughter returns quickly. Hardship is the forge, friendship, the steel it leaves behind. You listen to a group swapping stories, their words weaving into each other until it is impossible to tell where one tale ends and another begins. One boasts of killing a bear with bare hands. Another claims he once wrestled a Dane twice his size and won. You laugh with them, not because you believe the stories, but because belief is unnecessary. These tales are gifts, and gifts are treasured at sea. As the sun dips low, painting the horizon in bruised purples, voices soften. One sailor hums an old tune, the kind sung in farm fields back home. Others join, their voices rough but steady. The song has no refrain, only verses that wander like the sea itself. You feel your chest tighten, not from cold, but from something deeper, nostalgia for homes you've never seen, for lives you've never lived. The song belongs to all, yet each man sings it differently, shaped by his own longing. The smell of tar and smoke clings to the air as the singing fades. You glance around and see men leaning against one another, some half asleep, some simply resting. Their shoulders touch, their cloaks overlap, their breaths mingle. It is not graceful, but it is intimate, a quiet act of trust. You reflect on how strange this is. Days ago, you were strangers packed onto a vessel of wood and wool, uncertain of survival. Now, you are bound by invisible threads stronger than rope. In this harsh place, bonds form quickly, or not at all. Those who remain distant risk more than loneliness, they risk weakness. The sea groans beneath the hull, steady, endless. You lean your head back, close your eyes, and let the murmurs of your shipmates wash over you. They talk of wives, of children, of farms waiting for spring ploughing. You catch fragments of longing in their voices, softened by laughter, and you realize it is not the food, not the sail, not even the oars that carry this ship. It is the men, holding each other up when the sea tries to tear them down. Night falls again, and with it comes the itching. You shift on the damp planks, scratching at your forearm, then your neck, then your scalp. The relief lasts seconds before the crawling sensation returns. Around you, men do the same, fingers digging through beards, nails raking across skin. The longship is alive not only with sailors but with stowaways too small to see. Archaeological digs of Viking burial sites have yielded fine-toothed combs, carved from bone or antler, suggesting that lice and fleas were constant companions. These combs were not vanity alone, they were survival tools, scraping pests from hair and beard. You imagine one in your hand now, dragging through tangles, the click of lice crushed between its teeth. Instead, you have only your nails, and the work feels endless. One sailor pulls at his beard, eyes narrowing, then pinches something between thumb and nail. With a pop, he flicks it into the sea. He grins at you, as though victorious. An odd little custom surfaces here. Some men treat the hunt for lice like a game, competing over who can kill the most in one sitting. You watch two crewmates crouched together, holding their cloaks to the faint light of a lantern, inspecting each other's hair like apes in a forest. Their laughter rings out even as they scratch furiously at their own scalps. There is no full agreement among historians about how heavily these infestations plagued sailors. Some argue that the constant damp and cramped conditions made them unbearable. Others believe men grew so accustomed they barely noticed. As you sit here with your skin alive with crawling, you cannot imagine ignoring it. Sleep becomes impossible when every itch demands attention. The smell of unwashed bodies only deepens the discomfort. Wool cloaks damp with sweat and seawater, never fully dry. Boots remain slick, socks stiff with salt. You scratch harder, until your skin burns. The sensation turns from irritation to obsession, and you see it mirrored in the men around you. One curses loudly, ripping off his tunic, scratching until his chest is streaked red. Another rubs his head against the mast like a restless animal. And yet, even this misery carries strange humour. Someone jokes that the lice are paying fare like passengers, each one a silver coin. Laughter spreads, thin but real. The truth is bitter, there is no escape. You may throw one louse overboard, but 10 remain. The crew accepts this, turning torment into banter, their only weapon against endless itching. Your fingers ache from scratching, and still the crawling persists. You lean back, closing your eyes, imagining the combs found in graves finely carved, delicate, practical. You wonder if those long-dead warriors found the same small relief, pausing between battles not for rest but to hunt vermin. It is almost comforting to think so. If even heroes carried lice, perhaps your suffering is less humiliating. The night air sharpens, cold enough to numb the worst of the itching. You tug your cloak tighter, scratching less, breathing deep. Around you the ship creaks, gulls cry faintly in the distance, and men mutter in half-dreams. The lice remain, but exhaustion outweighs discomfort. Slowly, reluctantly, you drift into uneasy sleep, skin alive with reminders that even the fiercest sailors are still at the mercy of the smallest foes. Dawn brings not calm but tension. You feel it before you hear it. The air is sharper, the men restless, their voices pitched higher than usual. A quarrel erupts near the mast. Two sailors stand chest to chest, eyes blazing, fists clenched. Their shouts rattle across the deck, carrying above the hiss of waves. It is well recorded in saga fragments that fights among crews were not rare. Weeks at sea, pressed together with hunger, cold, and exhaustion, bred tempers as fierce as storms. When one man bumped another, or when rations seemed unfair, sparks ignited quickly. You see it now as one sailor shoves the other, sending him sprawling into a coil of rope. Gasps and laughter ripple across the crew. Curiously enough, there are stories of sailors keeping their weapons close, even while rowing axes tucked beside benches, knives at belts. You glance around and spot steel glinting in the grey light. The thought chills you. A fistfight is one thing, but if a blade appears, blood will stain these planks. The overseer strides forward, his voice cutting like an oar through water. He bellows, seizes both men by their tunics, and shoves them apart. One spits onto the deck, the other mutters a curse, but neither dares lift steel. Among scholars, disagreement remains about how discipline was enforced in such moments. Some suggest captains ruled with iron fists, punishing quarrels harshly to prevent mutiny. Others believe crews themselves policed disputes, preferring quick scuffles to drawn-out feuds. Watching this scene, you suspect both are true. Authority halts the fight, but the murmurs among the men keep the fire alive, smouldering beneath the surface. The smell of sweat and anger fills the air, mingling with the brine. You rub your arms, uneasy, waiting for the next outburst. The ship feels smaller in such moments, its narrow deck a stage for grudges with no place to hide. You imagine nights when these quarrels boil over in darkness, fists striking quietly, whispered threats carried in the creak of timbers. The overseer barks again, ordering the men back to their oars. Reluctantly they obey, muscles tense, jaws tight. The rhythm resumes, wood against water, the chant rising once more. Yet the energy is different now, sharper, harder, as if each pull is a blow meant for the other. You feel it in your own arms, anger humming through the wood, though you are not the one who fought. Later, when the shift changes, the two quarrellers avoid each other. One sharpens his knife, steel scraping stone, eyes flicking toward the other man. The other mutters with friends, laughter too forced, too brittle. You sense the tension may not be finished. Life at sea offers no space for grudges to cool. Still, humour creeps back slowly. A sailor nearby mimics the fight, wobbling dramatically before collapsing into the ropes. Laughter erupts, even from those still scowling. You realize this too is part of survival, mocking anger, until it dissolves in something bearable. Perhaps that is why so few feuds end in blood. Laughter stitches wounds before they fester. You lean on the rail, staring at the endless water. The fight has passed, but the lesson remains. The sea does not break men with waves alone. It breaks them with each other, with tempers sharpened by hunger, with pride too heavy for such narrow decks. And yet, the ship sails on, rowers chanting, overseers shouting, the quarrel fading into the rhythm once again. The quarrel fades, but the unease it left behind lingers in the creak of the ship. As night draws close, men begin whispering, their voices hushed, their eyes darting toward the dark horizon. A storm might stir fear, but there is another kind of unease at sea, the unseen, the gods, the question of fate itself. You sit among them, the salt stinging your lips, listening as prayers rise in low, rumbling tones. It is well known from written sagas and runic inscriptions that Vikings called upon their gods while at sea, asking for strength, protection, or simply mercy. You hear Thor's name murmured, Odin's invoked with solemnity, even Njord, lord of the sea and winds, addressed in trembling voices. The crew does not pray together like a church. Each man prays in his own way, some whispering into their beards, others gripping amulets carved from bone or wood. One curious sight catches your eye, a sailor tying a strip of red cloth to the rigging. He mutters words you cannot catch, then touches his forehead. The cloth flutters wildly in the breeze. Whether talisman or offering, it holds his gaze, as if it alone steadies the ship. You realize the sea demands not only muscle but magic, or at least the belief in it. Still, modern researchers are divided about how deeply sailors truly depended on such rituals. Some argue the sagas exaggerated, that real men focused on rope and oar, not charms and chants. Others insist these practices were daily companions, woven into every voyage. Watching the men tonight, you sense the truth lies in lived habit. When storms threaten or silence grows too deep, prayers rise as naturally as breath. The sky looms heavy with clouds, blotting out stars. The ship feels small, its dragon prow thrusting into nothingness. You clutch your cloak tighter, your body trembling less from cold than from the weight of unseen eyes. Does Odin watch now, one-eyed and stern, judging whether you are worthy to survive? Or do the Norns, spinners of fate, already weave the end of this voyage into their tapestry? The men's voices swell, then taper off. Silence returns, broken only by the moan of the mast and the slap of water against hull. You feel the hush press against your ears, thick and unsettling. It is as though the ocean listens, weighing each prayer, deciding whether to grant favor or demand sacrifice. One man kneels at the bow, pressing his forehead against the dragon's carved head. His lips move quickly, urgently. Another tosses a splinter of wood into the sea, a gift to whatever spirits lurk below. You watch it bob once, then vanish in the swell. Your chest tightens. Would such a gift appease or insult? The answer feels forever beyond reach. You breathe deep, the air damp with brine and smoke, and whisper your own words, not to Odin, not to Thor, not even to Christ, simply to the sea itself, asking it to bear you onward without malice. Perhaps that is enough. Perhaps the sea is God enough on its own. The clouds shift slightly, a thin crack of starlight glimmering through. A sigh of relief ripples along the crew. Men settle, their shoulders dropping, their mutters fading into snores. You lie back against the planks, staring at that single star until your eyes blur. It feels like an answer, though you cannot say from whom. The star you watch through the clouds fades with dawn, but something else catches your eye. Along the ropes and beams, you notice tiny carvings, symbols etched into wood, bits of bone tied with twine, feathers dangling from knots. At first you think them scraps of repair, but then you realize they are deliberate. The ship itself is wrapped in charms. It is broadly accepted among historians that Viking crews carried talismans at sea, tokens meant to guard against storms or misfortune. Some were amulets of Thor's hammer, Mjolnir, others runes carved into oars or mast. You run your fingers over one carving, a spiral shape, shallow but clear. The wood feels smoother where countless hands have touched it in passing, as though belief has polished it more than weather. An odd little practice you see repeated is the way sailors spit over the side after touching these charms. One man does it solemnly, eyes closed, another with a grin, tossing his saliva into the waves, as if mocking the ocean itself. Superstition takes many forms, but all share one root: the need to feel in control. The air smells different today, fresher, carrying hints of pine from some unseen shore perhaps. A sailor beside you mutters that it's a sign the gods are pleased, that the voyage will be safe. Yet another shakes his head, whispering that too much calm means a storm is gathering. Among scholars, there's lively debate about whether sailors truly believed these omens, or whether they used them simply as conversation, a way to pass endless hours. Looking at these men's faces, the mix of hope and dread, you suspect belief was real, but not always uniform. Each man carried his own truths like talismans tucked into his tunic. One of the more eccentric objects you notice is a bird skull tied to the end of a rope, its beak pointing outward like a sentinel. The man who placed it there strokes it often, murmuring under his breath. Perhaps he believes it wards off sea serpents, or perhaps it's simply the memory of a hunt back home. You smile faintly. On land, such an object might seem grotesque. Out here, it is comfort. The morning brightens, light shimmers on water, the sail bellies with a steady wind, and the ship hums forward. Still, men pause as they pass these charms, touching, muttering, nodding. It becomes a ritual stitched into their work, seamless as breathing. You realize how essential these small acts are. They turn fear into routine, randomness into meaning. The dragon prow itself looms ahead, carved fierce and proud. Some claim such figures were meant to frighten away spirits of the deep. Others argue they were for show, intimidation for those waiting on distant shores. You tilt your head, tracing the sharp snarl of the dragon's jaw, and wonder which it island, maybe both. Maybe no one truly knew, but carving the beast gave sailors the sense they were never alone. The wind strengthens, and the ship cuts faster. Men grin, the mood lighter, voices louder. The charms dangle and sway, catching sunlight, casting tiny shadows across the deck. For a fleeting moment, it feels as though every carving, every feather, every scrap of bone does its work. The sea seems tamer, the horizon friendlier. And then, a gull swoops low, pecking at one dangling talisman, tearing it free before vanishing into the sky. The man who owned it curses loudly, face pale. He rushes to the rail, staring after the bird. The crew falls silent. For a breath, all eyes flick to the sky, to the waves, waiting for disaster. Nothing comes. The wind holds, the ship sails on. Slowly, laughter rises, mocking the man's panic, turning fear into another joke. Yet you see him that night carving another charm, hands trembling as he works. You lean back, watching the feathers and carvings sway in the breeze. They are small things, almost laughable. Yet you know, without them, the weight of fear would crush men long before hunger or storm. Belief, whether true or not, is as vital as food and water. The sea demands it, and the sailors give it freely. By midday, the sea begins to stir with more than waves. A low moan rises from the water, so deep you feel it in your chest before you hear it with your ears. The men pause at their oars, heads turning, eyes scanning the horizon. Then you see it, a broad grey back rolling up from the depths, slick and shining. Another follows farther off. The water heaves as something massive exhales, sending a plume of mist into the air. It is well attested in chronicles and later travellers' accounts that Viking sailors frequently encountered whales. To them, these beasts were both a marvel and a menace. Some sagas describe whales as gifts from the gods, bringing meat and oil. Others cast them as sea monsters, ready to crush ships with a single lash of the tail. You now feel both emotions at once, astonishment and dread, as the sea around you stirs with giants. One curious detail stands out. Instead of panic, some sailors laugh nervously, calling out names to the creatures as though greeting old friends. One man mutters that the sight means fortune, that whales guide ships toward land. Another swears it means storms to come. No one agrees, but everyone watches. The creatures draw closer. You smell them before you feel them, a rank, fishy stench carried on the breeze. The water boils as a massive head breaks the surface, barnacles encrusted on grey skin, an eye glimmering dark and ancient. It blinks once, enormous and unhurried, then vanishes beneath with a sweep that rocks the longship. The deck shudders, men stagger, ropes strain. You grip the railing, heart hammering. There is no consensus among modern scholars whether Vikings hunted whales actively at sea or merely scavenged those that washed ashore. Evidence leans toward the latter, yet some sagas tell of daring chases, crews throwing harpoons into dark water. Watching the size of the beast before you, you cannot imagine risking such madness. The ship itself seems no larger than a toy beside it. Still, temptation glimmers in the eyes of some sailors. They whisper about blubber for oil, meat for weeks, bone for carving. Hunger breeds dangerous thoughts. Yet others shake their heads fiercely, crossing themselves or clutching amulets. To harm a whale, they say, is to invite doom. The argument simmers, even as the giants circle, surfacing in great arcs, spraying mist like geysers. The sound overwhelms you, the slap of tails against water, the thunder of air rushing from blowholes, the creak of the ship as it rises and falls in their wake. You taste salt sharp on your lips, your stomach lurching as the deck tilts. The sea feels alive in a new way, not just as water, but as a world filled with beings larger, older, and perhaps wiser than you. One beast surfaces so close you could touch it. Its skin glistens with scars, pale lines crisscrossing grey flesh. Its eye fixes on you vast, unreadable, alien. For a heartbeat, you feel seen, measured, weighed by something beyond human scale. Then it slides away, vanishing in a swell that rocks the ship dangerously to one side. Men shout, scrambling to balance. The overseer bellows for calm. Oars dip again. The chant resumes, though voices shake. Slowly the ship steadies, pulling forward, leaving the whales behind. The men glance back often, muttering, but the sea grows quiet once more. You sit trembling, breath shallow. Your palms sweat, your heart pounds. The memory of that vast eye lingers, dark and endless. You realize that storms and hunger are not the only terrors at sea. Sometimes the ocean itself rises in the form of creatures so immense they make men feel like ants. And yet, awe threads through the fear. You whisper to yourself, what gods place such giants here, and why do they allow us to pass unharmed? The whales vanish into the deep, leaving only a restless swell and men muttering about omens. The ship presses on, but the sea has not finished testing you. A sharp crack splits the rhythm of oars, the sound of wood splintering. A rower curses, holding a broken shaft in his hands. The long, polished oar has snapped clean in the middle, jagged edges pointing like teeth. It is well documented from archaeological finds that Viking oars were crafted from sturdy pine or ash, chosen for both strength and flexibility. Each one could stretch over 15 feet, a lifeline of speed and maneuvering. Without them, the ship faltered. You see this now as the rhythm breaks, the rower's bench suddenly useless, the crew stumbling to adjust. One curious trick emerges quickly. The men keep spares lashed beneath the benches, shorter than the originals but carved hastily from whatever wood could be spared. A sailor drags one out, muttering that it will hold until the gods laugh again. You smile despite yourself. It is an improvisation born of necessity, and necessity never waits long at sea. Still, the replacement is crude. It splashes unevenly, throwing off the chant. The overseer barks orders, urging the rowers back into rhythm. Sweat pours, muscles strain, but the harmony falters with every weaker stroke. You realize how fragile the system is, how one broken oar can ripple through an entire ship like a crack in glass. There is debate among historians about how crews repaired or replaced oars mid-journey. Some suggest carpenters traveled with the fleet, shaping new shafts from raw timber at each landing. Others argue that every sailor was expected to improvise, shaving branches into tools when needed. Watching now, you see men haul out tools, scraping splinters smooth, binding the break with rope and pitch to make it last a little longer. Their work is clumsy, rushed, but it buys survival. The smell of fresh-cut wood mingles with salt air, sharp and clean. Chips scatter across the deck, carried away by wind. One man steadies the broken oar against his thigh, pounding with a mallet until it fits into the lock again. The sound echoes like hammer blows in a forge, a reminder that even at sea, carpentry is as vital as swordplay. The repaired oar dips once more into the water. It bends dangerously, but it holds. A cheer rises, thin but genuine, and the rhythm resumes. The chant grows louder, men stamping their feet, beating the sea into submission once more. You join them, your own hands gripping wood, your own arms pulling until muscles burn. Yet the lesson lingers. The sea does not always strike with storms or monsters. Sometimes it tests you with splinters, with small cracks that threaten the hull. You glance at the other oars, imagining them snapping one by one, the ship left adrift. The thought chills you more than thunder. As evening falls, the broken shaft is set aside, tied carefully with rope as if honored, a reminder of fragility, a warning carved in wood. You stretch your aching arms, gaze at the horizon, and wonder how many more oars will shatter before land greets you again. The repaired oar creaks in its lock, holding for now, and the men slip back into their rhythm. But as the sun dips low, you notice something unusual near the stern. A figure you have not seen before moves quietly among the crew. She is a woman, her cloak pulled close, hair bound in braids. For a moment you think the sea has conjured her, but no, she belongs here, though rare in this place. Archaeological findings and scattered sagas confirm that women occasionally join Viking voyages, though not often. Some travelled as traders, others as wives or companions, a few even as warriors. The accounts are fragmentary, and scholars disagree about how common it truly was. But the evidence is there. Women crossed the seas too, braving the same hunger, storms, and sleepless nights. You watch her move with quiet confidence, checking bundles of cloth and a small chest lashed against the mast. One odd little habit catches your eye. She knots charms into the sailors' cloaks as she passes, tiny stitches of red thread at the hems. The men don't mock her, they let her work. Some even smile faintly, touching the threads as if reassured. You realize she holds a role beyond passenger. She is part healer, part seer, perhaps both. Her presence stirs unease among a few. A young sailor mutters that women aboard bring bad luck, that the sea itself grows jealous. An older man silences him with a glare. The debate lingers quietly. Was she a risk or a blessing? Modern researchers remain divided as well. Some argue women were tolerated only in special cases. Others insist their skills, healing, trading, storytelling made them invaluable. Watching her calm, steady steps, you believe the latter. The smell of herbs clings to her, sharp and earthy, a welcome change from sweat and tar. She pulls a pouch from her belt, scattering dried leaves into a bowl of water, creating a bitter brew. A sick sailor nearby sips it and sighs with relief. Whispers ripple. She knows her craft. You feel the ship relax around her, as though her presence balances the rougher edges of male tempers. Yet there is tension too. In the narrow space of a long ship, privacy is scarce, and eyes linger longer than they should. You notice her sitting apart, back against the mast, gaze fixed on the horizon. She speaks little, but when she does, her words carry weight. One sailor asks about the weather, and she answers softly, "The wind will turn before dawn." The men nod, some convinced, some skeptical, but all listening. Night deepens. Stars prick the sky, the sea sighs. You watch her silhouette framed against lantern light, steady and calm. She is not a distraction, as some feared, but an anchor, another presence to believe in when the sea seems endless. You pull your cloak tighter, settling onto the planks, and think, perhaps the ship itself mirrors the world ashore. Men and women both endure hunger and hardship, both carve meaning into wood and cloth. And whether rare or common, her place here proves one truth. Survival at sea belongs to all who dare it, not just to men with oars. Morning light glimmers off the sea, and with it comes the promise of land, not the final destination, but a brief stop. The longship noses toward a rocky inlet, the dragon prow cutting through foam. You squint and see a cluster of wooden huts perched on the shore, smoke curling faintly from fires. The men stir with new energy, voices rising in eager chatter. For the first time in many days, trade will replace toil. It is well established that Viking voyages were not only raids but also commerce. Ships carried furs, walrus ivory, amber, and woven cloth to barter for silver, spices, or foreign wares. You feel this truth as the men drag out bundles from beneath benches, soft pelts wrapped tightly, coils of rope, carved trinkets gleaming in the morning sunday. These are their treasures, not stolen but carried from home, meant for markets across the sea. One curious detail you notice is how carefully the goods are handled compared to weapons or tools. A man might toss his axe aside carelessly, but he cradles a bundle of furs as though it were his own child. Trade goods means silver, silver means power, and power means survival. The ship grinds gently against the shallows, and men leap into the surf, dragging the vessel toward shore. Your boots sink into wet sand, the smell of smoke and fish strong in the air. Villagers emerge, some cautious, some smiling. Words are exchanged, gestures made, hands pointing toward goods. Soon, the rhythm of barter begins. Scholars remain divided about how peaceful these exchanges usually were. Some evidence shows long-standing trade routes built on trust, while sagas brim with tales of markets turning bloody. You sense both are possible. Today, though, the air feels calm. Coins glint, laughter rises, and the tension of the sea loosens into the simple act of exchange. You wander among the stalls, watching sailors haggle over silver arm rings, knives with unfamiliar hilts, dried fruit you haven't seen in months. The smells are overwhelming: tar, smoke, salt, mingled with exotic spices carried from far-off lands. A trader offers a pouch of nuts. You bite one, savoring the sweetness, and nearly weep at the taste. After weeks of salted fish, it feels like a feast. The woman aboard the ship moves too, offering cloth stitched with runes. Villagers touch the patterns with reverence, pressing coins into her hand. She bows her head, saying little, yet her presence softens the exchange. The men glance at her respectfully, as though she lends the trade a kind of blessing. Not all sailors barter. Some head straight for the fires, warming their hands, sighing with relief. Others slump onto benches, gulping fresh water or weak ale offered by hosts. A few vanish into huts, chasing comforts you prefer not to imagine. The shore becomes a blur of noise, smoke, and laughter. The overseer keeps a sharp eye, ensuring nothing vanishes from the ship without payment. His voice cuts through the bustle whenever tempers flare. You see him intervene as two men argue over a knife. He ends it with a glare, settling the matter before blood can spill. Discipline follows even here, even with silver in hand. By afternoon, the ship is laden again, not with furs but with silver coins, sacks of grain, new ropes, and small luxuries tucked into cloaks. The men grin, pockets heavier, spirits lifted. Yet beneath the cheer you sense urgency. This stop is temporary. The sea calls them back, and the horizon waits. You climb aboard once more, cloak damp with spray, heart full of sights and sense of shore. The dragon prow turns outward, pointing toward open water. Behind you, the village fades into haze. Ahead, only waves and wind remain. The rhythm of trade has passed, and the rhythm of the sea returns. The silver has been stowed, the grain lashed in sacks, and the ship once again faces the open sea. But the mood aboard has changed. The laughter of trade fades quickly into something heavier anticipation, sharpened by the clang of iron. You notice men pulling out helmets, polishing them with scraps of cloth, checking for dents. Axes are lifted into the light, edges examined, whetstones rasping against steel. The air is filled with the smell of oil, metal, and leather. It is well established in chronicles and burial finds that Viking raiding parties prepared meticulously before reaching foreign shores. Helmets were rare but prized, mail shirts scarcer still, yet every man carried a weapon, axe, spear, or sea-axe knife. You see them now, each tool gleaming with care, each one transformed from mundane iron into a promise of violence. One curious ritual unfolds at the bow. A sailor kneels, drawing his blade slowly across his palm, not deep enough to wound, just enough to leave a line of red. He smears it on the axe head, whispering words under his breath. Others nod, as if this gesture strengthens not only the blade but the man himself. Superstition and steel twine together here, inseparable. Debate continues among scholars about how formal these preparations truly were. Some argue raiding was as organized as a military campaign, with captains assigning roles, scouts chosen, signals rehearsed. Others believe it was looser, almost chaotic, each man arming himself and trusting in brute strength. Watching the crew now, you see hints of both. Discipline shows in their steady sharpening, their calm checking of shields. Yet beneath it lies a restlessness, a hunger, as if each man prepares more for his own destiny than for the group. The sounds grow louder, the scrape of stones on blades, the thunk of spear hafts tested against the deck, the clatter of shields pulled into position. A low chant begins, one man humming first, another joining, until voices rumble together. It is not the rowing song this time. It is deeper, harsher, carrying the weight of blood to come. You shift uneasily. The sea smells the same salt and tar, but the mood is different. It presses heavier than storms, heavier than hunger. Violence hangs in the air, waiting. You glance at the woman by the mast. Her face is calm, unreadable, but her hands move quickly, tying charms into cloaks. Murmuring words. The men accept them without question. Belief, like steel, is another shield. One sailor beside you grins, his teeth yellow, his eyes bright. He taps your shoulder, lifts his axe, and says, "Tomorrow, silver will flow like ale." You nod weakly, unsure whether to smile. He laughs anyway, slapping your back hard enough to sting. For him, the promise of plunder tastes sweeter than fear. The overseer walks the length of the deck, eyes sharp, correcting, urging. He barks at one man for leaving his shield strap loose, at another for letting his spear tip dull. His presence binds the crew, pulling their scattered hunger into focus. You realize his role is more than discipline, he is the spine of the ship, holding chaos upright. As the sun sinks, the deck glows red, reflecting off polished blades. The chant grows louder, voices harsh, carrying across the waves. The sound prickles your skin. It is not beautiful, not soothing, it is a promise, a warning to whatever village lies ahead. And yet beneath it all you sense the truth. Raiding is not only about greed, it is also about survival. Silver buys food, grain feeds families. Without it, winters kill. The men sharpen blades not only for glory, but because hunger gnaws sharper than steel. The sky darkens, the chant fades into silence. The men settle, weapons close at hand, eyes gleaming in lantern light. Tomorrow, or the day after, land will rise on the horizon, and with it, fire and plunder. For now, the ship drifts quietly, like a predator waiting in the shadows. You clutch your cloak tighter, heart pounding, and wonder, will you raise a blade too, or will you only watch? The weapons are sharpened, the chants have faded, and the sea has swallowed the sound of war cries. But soon another cry rises, this time from a man at the benches. His hand is cut, the wound raw and bleeding from a slipped blade. He groans, clutching his palm, crimson dripping onto the deck. The mood shifts instantly from bravado to urgency. It is well attested through sagas and burial finds that Vikings practiced basic medicine, carrying herbs and knowledge passed down from wise women and healers. You see this knowledge now as the woman on board steps forward quickly, her pouch already open. She kneels beside the injured man, prying his hand gently away from his chest. The cut is shallow, but deep enough to fester if ignored. You catch the smell first, sharp, earthy, pungent as she crushes dried plants between her fingers. Wormwood and yarrow, perhaps, common herbs known to staunch bleeding and fight infection. She presses the mash against the wound, binding it with a strip of linen torn from a spare tunic. The man hisses, but does not pull away. His jaw tightens, his eyes lock on the horizon. Endurance is expected here. One curious detail: she spits into the herbs before pressing them down. Some sailors glance away, muttering about spit carrying strength. Whether superstition or practical moisture to activate the mash you cannot tell, but her hands move steady, sure, and soon the bleeding slows. Among historians, debate continues about how advanced Viking medical care truly was. Some argue they relied only on charms and crude remedies. Others point to evidence of trepanation, cleanly healed bone fractures, and medicinal plants as proof of remarkable skill. Watching her now, you see both threads woven together: knowledge and ritual, science and belief. The man flexes his hand, wincing but smiling faintly. His comrades thump his shoulder, praising his toughness, mocking his clumsiness. Laughter returns, fragile but real. The woman ties the bandage tight, then retreats quietly, her task complete. The smell of herbs lingers, sharp against the salt air. Later that evening, another case arises. A sailor stumbles with a fever, sweat dripping down his brow despite the cool wind. His skin glistens, his breath ragged. The crew mutters uneasily. Illness spreads quickly in such close quarters. The healer mixes another brew, this time bitter tea poured into a wooden cup. She coaxes it between his lips, murmuring words you cannot hear. He drinks, coughs, then settles against a bench, eyes fluttering closed. The overseer watches with narrowed eyes, torn between suspicion and respect. Some men whisper that fevers mean bad spirits. Others say the herbs will drive it out. The truth lies somewhere beyond reach. You realize that out here, sickness is as dangerous as storms. One fever unchecked sweep through the crew like fire across dry grass. You lean back, the deck hard beneath you, the scent of herbs still sharp in your nose. It strikes you how fragile these men are, despite their iron bravado. Axes and swords gleam, shields ring, but a slip of a knife or a fever in the chest could undo them faster than any foe. The night grows quiet again. Lantern light flickers across tired faces. The wounded man sleeps with his bandaged hand across his chest. The fevered sailor breathes more steadily, and the healer sits by the mast, her eyes distant, her hands busy with threads and herbs. You watch her and wonder, is it her skill or the gods' favor that keeps these men alive? Perhaps both. You close your eyes, hearing the sea sigh against the hull, the faint moans of sleepers, the creak of ropes overhead. The war cries of earlier feel far away now. In their place lingers the humbler truth of survival: stitched wounds, bitter bruise, whispered prayers. Steel may win silver, but it is herbs and hands like hers that keep the silver bearers breathing long enough to spend it. The fever breaks by dawn, and the wounded hand stays clean beneath its linen bandage. Relief stirs through the ship, but with it comes a new demand. The silence must be filled. Men rise sluggishly from damp planks, rubbing stiff shoulders, pulling cloaks tighter, and then one begins to hum. The sound is low at first, almost a growl carried on the morning wind. Soon another joins, and then another, until the deck vibrates with voices. It is well attested in Norse tradition that music and rhythm were woven into daily life. On land, they sang in mead halls, around fires, in fields while threshing grain. At sea, song became more than entertainment, it was endurance. Voices kept the oars in unison, lifted spirits against monotony, and reminded weary men that they were not alone. You feel this as the chant swells, deep and raw, echoing across the endless water. One quirky detail makes you smile. A sailor near you bangs two spoons together, their dull clatter keeping time like a drum. Another stomps his boot in rhythm against the bench, sending vibrations up through the planks. It is crude music, born not of instruments but of necessity, yet it fills the ship with life. There is debate among researchers about whether sea shanties, as we think of them, existed in Viking times. Some argue the tradition is later, shaped by medieval and early modern sailors. Others point to sagas that describe rhythmic work songs as proof that Vikings too sang their labors into motion. Listening now, you sense the truth is simple. Men always find rhythm when faced with endless repetition. The oars move smoother, the crew sits straighter, the day feels lighter. The lyrics shift, some verses bawdy, others heroic. One man bellows about Thor smashing giants, Another shouts a crude rhyme about a farmer's daughter back in Norway. Laughter bursts between stanzas, carried on the wind. The sea seems to answer, waves slapping the hull in sync, gulls wheeling above with cries like shrill accompaniment. You close your eyes, letting the sound wash over you. The chant rolls through your bones, steady as a heartbeat. It soothes the ache in your arms, dulls the gnaw of hunger. For a moment, you forget the salt sores on your skin, the lice crawling beneath your cloak, the endless horizon that never changes. Music is magic, of a kind as powerful as charms or prayers. As the sun climbs, the songs grow louder, rowdier. Men clap each other on the back, voices cracking, spirits lifting. The overseer doesn't silence them. He lets the noise carry. Perhaps he knows the truth too. A ship without song is a ship sinking into despair. By midday, the chanting softens into hums, then into silence as throats grow hoarse. The deck creaks, the sea sighs, and the rhythm continues in memory. You lick your lips, still tasting salt, and think, without songs, the voyage would stretch unbearable. With them, even misery becomes almost bearable. You rest your head against the mast, the ghost of melody still thrumming in your chest. Around you, men doze or murmur, but the bond lingers. Shared voices have stitched the crew together again, firmer than rope. Out here, on this endless grey plain of sea and sky, song is not luxury, it is survival. The echoes of song fade, leaving the ship hushed, but soon a new excitement stirs. A small sail appears on the horizon, its white square barely visible against the pale sky. The men straighten, squinting, murmuring to one another. Another vessel means trade or trouble. The overseer narrows his eyes, then orders the ship to hold course. It is well established in both chronicles and archaeological finds that Viking voyages often paused at foreign ports, trading not only goods but also stories, tools, and food. You see the possibility now as the other ship draws closer, its hull shallow like your own, its prow carved with a simple bird instead of a dragon. The men aboard wave, not with weapons but with open hands. Relief spreads across your crew. This will be commerce, not combat. The ships ease alongside each other, ropes tossed, planks stretched between decks. You cross carefully, the boards creaking beneath your boots, and step onto the foreign vessel. The smell hits you first. Dried fruit, nuts, smoked fish, mingled with the tang of resin. Goods are piled neatly in bundles, their colors brighter than anything you've seen in weeks. One curious sight catches your attention. Small glass beads, strung on cords, glittering blue and green in the light. They seem fragile, useless in battle, yet the sailors handle them with reverence. Beads like these have been found in graves across Scandinavia, proof of trade networks stretching as far as the Middle East. Here, you hold one up to the sun, marveling at how it glows like frozen water. Scholars debate how equal these exchanges were. Some argue Vikings dominated, taking what they wished through threat of force. Others believe long-standing partnerships thrived, with mutual benefit on both sides. Watching now, you see neither arrogance nor fear, only eagerness. Silver changes hands, amber is traded for grain, and laughter rises between languages broken by gesture, but rich in meaning. The woman from your ship steps forward too, her pouch of herbs and cloth in hand. She trades a bundle of dried nettles for a pouch of raisins, her eyes softening at the sweetness when she tastes one. The men grin, pleased to see her satisfied. It feels less like bargaining and more like sharing between weary travelers. The smell of exotic spices drifts from a sack, cinnamon perhaps, or cloves. A sailor holds it to his nose, eyes closing in bliss. You do the same, the warmth of the scent carrying you far from salt and rot. For a moment, you feel as though you stand in a market square instead of upon a rocking deck. But trade is not only about goods. Stories are exchanged too. One sailor boasts of a storm that split his mast clean in two. Another warns of pirates lurking farther south. You listen, absorbing each tale, each rumour a thread in the great tapestry of the sea. As the sun sinks, the planks are pulled back, ropes coiled, farewells shouted. Your ship grows heavy with new supplies, grains, fruit, trinkets tucked carefully away. The men grin, chewing dried figs, their spirits brighter. The foreign ship drifts away, its sail swelling once more, until it is no more than a pale smudge on the horizon. You sit back against the mast, chewing a raisin, the sweetness shocking after weeks of salt. The sea stretches on, but your heart feels lighter. For a brief time, the voyage was not about survival or conquest, but about exchange humans meeting on the wide water, giving and receiving. You swallow, savouring the taste, and know this moment will linger long after the horizon swallows the other ship. The sweetness of figs and raisins lingers on your tongue, but soon the mood shifts again. The overseer calls the men to order, his voice sharp against the wind. Supplies are secured, weapons checked, and discipline enforced. The longship slides forward, its prow aimed once more toward distant shores. The men's laughter fades, a sterner rhythm returns. It is well documented in sagas and ship laws that Viking crews lived under strict codes. A ship could not function otherwise. Rules governed not only rowing and fighting, but also food, tools, and even speech. You feel the weight of these rules now as the overseer stalks the deck, eyes sharp as spearheads. One curious rule becomes clear when a sailor is caught sleeping past his shift. He stumbles up late, rubbing his eyes, and receives a sharp blow across the back from the overseer's staff. The rest of the crew looks away, silent, not daring to intervene. Shame burns brighter than pain here. Falling asleep at the wrong time could cost lives. There is disagreement among historians about how punishments were carried out. Some sources suggest lashes, fines, or loss of rations. Others hint at more brutal measures, casting a man adrift if he endangered the ship. What you see now suggests a middle path, harsh enough to instill fear, but not so severe as to waste a useful body. The smell of tar thickens as ropes are inspected, knots tightened, sails checked for wear. A young sailor is ordered to scrape barnacles from the hull with a long pole, leaning dangerously far over the side. His hands slip, nearly plunging him into the sea. The overseer barks again, this time more warning than punishment. You sense his role is not cruelty, but constant vigilance. Without it, chaos would creep in like rot. The crew accepts these rules with little protest. They mutter, they grumble, but they obey. You realize discipline is not only fear, it is survival's companion. The sea punishes disunity faster than any overseer. Later, a theft is discovered, a piece of dried meat missing from the shared stores. Tension thickens immediately, eyes darting, accusations whispered. The overseer demands the culprit step forward. Silence answers. He paces, face dark. Finally, he announces the penalty. If no one confesses, the entire crew's ration will be cut. Groans ripple, curses muttered, but still no confession. By nightfall, you chew less than your share, bitterness sharper than hunger. One sailor whispers to you that such measures are common. Better to punish all than let one thief weaken trust, he says, gnawing his small portion. You nod reluctantly. Out here, food is not just sustenance, it is faith. Without trust, the ship itself cracks. You stretch your legs on the planks, staring at the faint glimmer of stars above. The rules feel heavy, almost suffocating, yet you cannot deny their necessity. The longship is no democracy. It is a blade forged of many hands, kept sharp by order. The overseer passes again, eyes cold but steady. You glance at him and realize his burden is as great as yours. To rule at sea is to carry the weight of every mistake, every quarrel, every theft. He enforces harsh discipline not for pride, but because one crack in order means the sea swallows all. The wind shifts, the sail snaps taut, and the ship surges forward. You grip the bench, heart steadying. Rules may sting, punishments may bite, but together they keep the longship alive. And so you accept them, as you accept hunger, cold, and endless waves. The sea has no mercy. Discipline is the only shield against its wrath. The day's labour fades into night, and for once the sea offers no storms, no quarrels, no interruptions. The water lies calm, a dark mirror stretching without end. You sit quietly at the stern, cloak pulled close, the ship drifting with barely a ripple. Around you, voices hush. The men seem almost afraid to break the stillness, as if sound itself might wake some slumbering spirit below. It is well attested that Viking sailors often travelled beneath skies ablaze with the northern lights. Tonight, the heavens do not disappoint. Curtains of green unfurl overhead, shimmering like veils in the wind. A ripple of purple follows, then a flash of pale blue, as though the sky itself has become a shifting sea. Every man lifts his head, eyes wide, mouths parted in awe. One peculiar reaction catches your notice. A sailor claps his hands sharply, grinning, insisting the lights are spirits dancing, and noise will make them dance harder. Another hushes him quickly, muttering that noise will anger them. Belief differs, but reverence is shared. The lights command silence, whether through fear or wonder. Scholars still debate what Vikings thought of this spectacle. Some sources suggest they believed the lights were shields of the Valkyries, shining as they carried fallen warriors to Odin's hall. Others hint at tales of foxes racing across the sky, their tails scattering sparks into heavens. You listen as men whisper these stories, voices trembling with awe. None know the truth, but all agree. This is no ordinary sky. The air itself feels charged, each breath sharp in your lungs. The sea glimmers faintly, touched by reflections of green and violet. You reach into the water, your fingers breaking the surface, and for a heartbeat you imagine the ocean glowing with fire. The sensation prickles up your arm, whether real or imagined. Around you, men murmur prayers. Some lift amulets to their lips, others sit motionless, eyes reflecting shifting colors. The woman by the mast whispers quietly, her face pale in the strange light. You wonder if she sees prophecy in the glow, or only beauty. The silence deepens. Even the gulls seem absent. Only the creak of timbers remains, steady and low. You lean back, letting the vision fill your eyes. The lights ripple, bend, vanish, then return brighter than before. It feels endless, eternal. Yet you know dawn will come, and with it, grey skies once more. You reflect that these rare nights must have stitched themselves into memory, carried home in stories, exaggerated in sagas until men on land half believed the sea itself glowed. Watching now, you understand why. The sky is alive, and for once the ocean seems gentle, a mirror instead of a maw. Your body relaxes, your breathing slows. The ship drifts, the lights shimmer, the world softens into stillness. For a brief time, fear dissolves, quarrels vanish, hunger recedes. All that remains is the endless sky, painted with fire, and the hushed breath of men who know they are witnessing something far greater than themselves. The northern lights fade with dawn, leaving the sky washed in pale grey. A hush lingers among the crew, as if no one dares break the memory of shimmering skies. But soon the sea reminds you that awe does not last forever. A wave slaps the hull, another follows, and the rhythm of labour resumes. Oars dip once more, voices rise, and the longship pushes onward. It is well recorded that long voyages tested more than muscle. They tested endurance of mind. You feel this trial keenly now. Days blend together, each sunrise identical, each sunset swallowed by horizon. Hunger gnaws, muscles ache, but worse is the sameness, the endless stretch of water. To fight despair, men cling to routine rowing, mending, eating, sleeping. The cycle is prison and salvation at once. One curious coping habit emerges. A sailor begins carving into the bench where he sits, scratching runes with the tip of his knife. Another follows, tracing spirals into the wood. Soon many planks bear marks, names, charms, crude drawings. The ship itself becomes a diary, etched with boredom and hope. You run your fingers across one symbol, a sunwheel, carved deep. It feels less like art and more like a silent prayer. Scholars remain divided on how Viking sailors endured the monotony of long journeys. Some argue stories and games filled the hours. Others believe the work itself left no time for idleness. Watching now, you see both truths. Men tell sagas aloud, voices rising with each verse, while others slump silent, half asleep even as their arms pull at the oars. A strange tale passes from mouth to mouth. One sailor claims he once saw a sea serpent longer than 3 ships, its head crowned with horns. Another swears that islands sometimes sink beneath the waves, carrying whole villages with them. Laughter mixes with shivers. No one knows if the tales are lies, but all listen, because imagination breaks monotony when food cannot. The smell of damp wood grows stronger. Rain spits from the sky, steady but thin, soaking cloaks without fury. You shiver, pulling fabric tighter. The crew curses softly, yet keeps rowing. The overseer allows a short pause, ordering men to chew dried meat, but only a mouthful each. The taste is tough, salty, barely food, but the act itself breaks the endlessness. By evening the rain eases, leaving the deck slick. The men slump in exhaustion, faces pale in lantern light. You lean against the mast, your body aching. The monotony presses heavier than storms. At least storms bring clarity, fear sharpens, purpose strengthens. Here, there is only the weight of time. Yet even in monotony, there are bonds. A sailor leans his head on your shoulder, half asleep, trusting you to keep him upright. Another hums softly, a melody so faint it could be mistaken for the sea. These small gestures carry more strength than food. They remind you that survival is not endured alone. The horizon remains empty. No land, no ships, only grey sea and grey sky. You sigh, close your eyes, and let the rhythm of oars carry you into uneasy rest. This is the heart of the voyage. Not storms, not raids, but the endless middle, where men wrestle not with waves but with themselves. The grey sea stretches on for what feels like eternity, but then at last there is a change. A cry goes up from the bow. Men scramble to their feet, eyes straining toward the horizon. At first you see nothing but haze, then a darker line takes shape. Land. Faint, low, but real. The shout grows into cheers, voices breaking with relief. After endless days of monotony, the promise of solid earth stirs every man like a jolt of lightning. It is well attested in both archaeology and chronicles that landfall meant more than safety. It meant fresh water, food, and the chance to stretch cramped limbs on steady ground. You feel it in the sudden energy of the crew as they row harder, laughter breaking through their exhaustion. The overseer does not need to bark orders now, desperation drives the rhythm. One curious detail unfolds as the shore grows clearer. Men begin to tidy themselves, combing beards, straightening cloaks, adjusting weapons. Even after weeks of filth, they crave to arrive not as starving wrecks but as warriors and traders, proud and upright. A few spit into their palms and slick down wild hair, grinning sheepishly. Vanity survives even on the open sea. Scholars remain divided about what emotions dominated in these moments. Was it triumph at surviving the voyage, or fear of what awaited? Some argue men celebrated recklessly. Others suggest they approached landfall with equal parts joy and dread, for no shore was ever guaranteed safe. You feel both. Relief swells in your chest, yet your eyes scan nervously for smoke, for hostile figures, for signs of danger waiting. The air itself shifts. It carries the scent of pine and soil, faint but unmistakable after weeks of brine. You inhale deeply, almost trembling at the richness of it. The men notice too. They sniff the breeze, murmuring about forests, fields, perhaps even villages to raid or markets to trade. Hope and hunger sharpen together. As the ship glides closer, details emerge. Rocky cliffs, a scatter of trees, the pale strip of a beach. The dragon prow seems to snarl in anticipation, its wooden teeth bared at the new land. The men grip their oars tighter, their eyes gleaming. Some mutter prayers, others jokes, but all keep their gaze locked forward. The prow grinds against sand at last. The ship shudders, then stills. For a heartbeat, silence hangs an entire voyage suspended between sea and shore. Then men leap into the surf, splashing, shouting, laughing. Boots sink into wet earth. Hands clutch rocks and branches. Bodies collapse onto the ground as if it were treasure itself. You follow, stumbling onto land, your knees weak, your heart pounding. The smell of earth overwhelms you, rich, damp, alive. You kneel, pressing your palm into the soil, savoring the grit beneath your fingers. It feels like a miracle. Around you, men drink from streams, scoop handfuls of grass, tear fruit from bushes. Laughter rises, wilder than any song. For a moment, they are not raiders, not sailors, but children who have found home again. Yet even here, the sea's shadow lingers. You glance back at the longship, resting with its prow high on the sand, its hull scarred and weary. It has carried you through storms, hunger, quarrels, and silence. You feel a pang of gratitude for the wood itself, for every plank and nail that kept the sea at bay. Without it, none of you would stand here now. The overseer calls out, his voice stern once more. Order returns swiftly. Supplies must be unloaded, water replenished, watches set. The joy of land is brief. Survival remains. Yet as men carry barrels to the stream and gather firewood, their faces glow with satisfaction. They have endured the middle of the sea, and now the world opens before them. You sit on a rock, cloak heavy on your shoulders, watching the horizon. The sea glitters, vast and endless, yet somehow less threatening now. You survived it. You shared its storms, its monsters, its silence, its monotony. You carry its scars, salt sores, sleeplessness, aching limbs, but also its lessons. That survival is built from rhythm, from laughter, from discipline, from belief. And as night falls on this new shore, you feel the journey settle in your bones. Tomorrow may bring trade or battle, silver or blood. But tonight, you breathe pine-scented air, taste sweet water, and rest on steady earth. For the first time in what feels like forever, the sea does not cradle you, the land does. The journey has ended, and so has the story. The sea still whispers behind you, but now it sounds softer, more like memory than menace. The planks of the longship creak as they rest on sand, but the rhythm of oars, the shouts of storms, and the chants of weary men begin to fade, as though carried away on the tide. You sit quietly in the dark, feeling the stillness of solid ground beneath you. The scent of pine lingers. The cool air wraps gently around